Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you my June wrap up. This is the second time that I'm filming this video because I did film this video and another one last week. I was on a roll, I filmed 3 videos in one day, but then 2 of them, this one included, didn't end up having any sound. So I think I plugged in my microphone wrong or something like that, but I was really bummed about it because I was pretty happy with the videos and now I have to film them again. So we'll see how this goes. I might try to keep things a little bit shorter this time, go into my thoughts a little less deeply, but I say that often and then it does end up being a long video. So again, we'll see how it goes. Let's just dive into the wrap up. In June I read 11 books, which is a lot for me. I think that's the largest amount of books that I've ever read in a month. So that's great. I had a lot of time in June. It was a very weird month for me for personal reasons, but it did mean that I had a lot of time for reading and I also enjoyed most of the books that I read. There was one DNF, but I'll talk about that one later in the video as well. But for now, let's just get into the reviews. The first book I finished in June was a novella and it was Binti by Nedi Okorafor. This is a science fiction novella that I've seen around a lot in the bookish community over the past year or so, I think, and it's always sounded really good to me, so I vowed that I was going to read it in June because I'd been wanting to read it all year and now I finally did it. It's a very short book, it's the first book in a trilogy and there's also a short story, I think. It's about Binti, who is the first of her people, the Himba people, to be accepted into the prestigious Umza University, I think it was. Her family doesn't want Binti to go to the university, but she really does want to go, so she sneaks away at night and boards the spacecraft to the planet that Umza University is located on. But during that journey, something terrible happens and Binti has to deal with that. Like I said, I really enjoyed this novella. It was very short and I know that a lot of people had issues with that they didn't feel they could really connect to Binti or to the other characters because it was so short. And on the one hand, I really do understand that there were some characters that were introduced in a few sentences and then they were gone again, and I didn't really get the emotional impact from that. But on the other hand, I also think that the fact that this book was so short really adds to its strength, and I really did feel a connection with Binti. I really loved her as a main character and it really made me want to read the other 2 books in the trilogy as well. I haven't done that yet, but I really hope that I will get to it soon because they are also very short, so maybe I'll be able to squeeze them into my TBR somewhere. June was also the month that I did my Heartstopper marathon. I reread the first 3 books in the series and then I read the 4th volume for the first time. I spread it out over the month, so I had some Heartstopper to read during the entire month and it was such a wonderful experience. I absolutely adore these books. I love Nick and Charlie, I love the art style, I love all of their friends. For those of you who don't know, Heartstopper is a graphic novel series about Nick and Charlie who meet in school and they fall in love with one another. It's about identity, it's about sexuality, coming to terms with that, learning more about yourself, coming of age. It's also about mental illness, especially this last volume. And I think the 4th volume is also actually my favorite so far because of the way it deals with mental illness. I think the representation was very good. I think it's handled with grace, with kindness, and it was really nice to read about it like that. There's also a lot of different LGBT representation, which I think is wonderful. And these books are loved in the community for a reason. They are absolutely heartwarming, but they also pack a punch sometimes, and I adored them. Also in this final volume, Tori, who is Charlie's bigger sister, is an absolute badass and I absolutely adored her. Next up, I read a new release that was also one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and it was Mr. Impossible by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the sequel to Call Down the Hawk, which is the first book in the Dreamer trilogy, which is a sequel trilogy to the Raven Cycle. I'm not going to go into what this book is about because I don't want to spoil anything for the Raven Cycle, but I will say that it is about Ronan and his 2 brothers, who were also characters in the Raven Cycle, and it's about dreams and dreamers. I kind of feel like it's like the Raven Cycle but on steroids, if that makes sense. I don't think that makes sense. But there are a lot of high stakes, a lot is happening. The writing style again is amazing, as always with Maggie Stiefvater. I did enjoy this one more than the first book, Call Down the Hawk, which I reread last month. Because the first book felt a little bit messy at times because there was so much setup for the rest of the trilogy. A lot happened, a lot of different storylines needed to be set out, and because of that it did sometimes feel messy, but this one felt much more like it found its stride. I really enjoyed the characters a lot more in this book as well. I really loved Declan, who is one of the characters I didn't really like in the Raven Cycle, I think, but in this series. I adore him. I loved seeing how the storylines, how the plot progressed. There were some reveals that I thought were amazing, and I really can't wait to read the third book, but I don't think it even has a release date yet, so it's going to be a bit of a wait. Next up, I read a classic, and it was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley in this beautiful edition. I love this edition, and I really like the book as well. This one has been on my TBR for quite some time, and it's also on my list of 10 books I have to read in 2021. I've seen a lot of people talk about this book and love it, and some of my best friends love it as well, so it's always been a book that I've wanted to read, but I never really got around to it. But I'm glad that I did. It was a bit different than I expected. I'm not really sure what I expected. I knew about the story, of course, and I knew about the basic premise and about Frankenstein and his monster, but I didn't really know how the plot was going to progress or what really happened. I didn't really know about the revenge storyline, but I really enjoyed that. I did think Victor Frankenstein was a reprehensible human being. I really didn't enjoy him at all, but I also kind of think that maybe was the point of the book, or at least the point was to feel pity for the monster, Frankenstein's monster, which I really did. I felt for him a lot, but Victor Frankenstein himself, I felt very little pity for him. Mostly because he made it out to be as if he was the most wretched person in the world, that nobody had it worse than him, because of the things that he had done and because of the fact that he had created this monster. And I just thought that was so entitled and so up his own ass, because he's from a very rich family. He has money, he has clothes, he has food, he has everything he needs, and just him constantly nattering on about how he is the most wretched person there is. It just got on my nerves a lot, but nevertheless I did really enjoy this book. I thought it was very well done. I think Mary Shelley's writing style was absolutely beautiful. I loved that. I was a bit surprised that this was a frame narrative. I hadn't expected that, but then again, those were very popular back then, so it fits. I didn't think it was really necessary, but it was a nice way to tell the story. And this isn't necessarily a new favorite classic, I think, but I did really enjoy it. Next up, I read a non-fiction book that wasn't on my TBR, and that is Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. This is a book about the structures of novels, of how to structure your novel when you're writing one, and I'm currently rewriting the first draft of my novel. So this came in really handy. I've been wanting to read this for a while now, and it really helped me a lot in my writing and mostly in my preparation for the second draft. It goes into the basic structure every novel has, but a bit more in depth than just the 3 acts structure, and it's written in a very accessible way. It's very easy to read, it's very funny as well. She uses a lot of examples from other books to show you what she means and to really illustrate that most novels adhere to this structure, and I thought it was just very well done. I think this is going to be very helpful for me in the future in my writing as well. So I'm glad that I now finally read it. Then there was the book that I unfortunately DNF'd, and that was History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. This has been on my TBR for a while, and I actually picked it up I think 2 years ago, and I read a couple of pages and then decided that this was not the time that I wanted to read it, and I put it away again. And that might have been a bit of a sign that this might not be the book for me, because I rarely do that. When I pick up a book and when I start reading, I finish it. So yeah, that might not have been the best sign. But I did read another book by Adam Silvera, They Both Die at the End, a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed that, so I hoped that I would love this too. This book is about Griffin, who loses his first love in a drowning accident. They were no longer together at that point. They had been best friends ever since they were little, and they got in a relationship sometime during high school, but they broke up when Theo, the first love we're talking about, moved away to university, and Theo got a new boyfriend there called Jackson. And Griffin felt very salty about this, and he also had the hope and the conviction that one day they would get back together. But then Theo died. It's told through chapters that alternate between the now, with Theo being dead, and history, with them getting together, with their relationship. I got about 120 pages in before I decided to put it away, because I realized that I wasn't enjoying it. I was just thinking, oh, it's a short novel, I'll just make it through and then I'm done. And it felt like a chore to read this, and when I realized that, I thought, well, then I should just stop, because life is too short to read books you're not enjoying. I think the thing I didn't enjoy about this the most was Griffin. I really didn't like him as a main character. I didn't think he was a very nice person. He kept thinking that his grief was the only thing that mattered, and he got angry at Jackson for grieving Theo as well. He was just so self-centered, and maybe that changed during the novel, but I just couldn't deal with it. And I also think that his relationship with Theo was more based on obsession than on actual love and on a healthy basis. I also didn't like Theo because Griffin struggles with OCD and Theo really didn't seem to take that seriously. He just talked about Griffin's quirks and that just seemed kind of wrong. So the whole thing this book is built around, this love story between Griffin and Theo, I didn't care for it at all, and I think there was a lot coming to change Griffin's mind, to give him perspective. He was also communicating with Jackson, and I think they were going to become close, but I just didn't feel like reading on, so I think I'm going to unhaul this at some point. In June I also listened to an audiobook, and that was Hurricane Child by Kaysen Callender. This is a middle grade novel about a girl called Caroline Murphy, who lives in the Virgin Islands, I think. I think it was Water Island, but I'm not entirely sure now. And she has a hard time at school because nobody likes her, including her teacher, and they treat her horribly, and she also has to deal with the fact that her mother left a couple of years ago. And she wants to find her mother, but she doesn't know where to start, and she doesn't know where her mother has gone, if she's gone, if she's dead, what's really going on. She can't really talk about it to her father either. And then a new girl starts going to the school called Kalinda, and she and Caroline kind of form a bond and they start looking for her mother together. And although I enjoyed this novel, I didn't really feel any particular way about it. It was alright. I enjoyed myself, but I didn't really feel a connection to Caroline or to the other characters. I didn't really feel a connection to the storylines either. They felt a bit messy to me sometimes, the way they interconnected and how everything was done. So yeah, it was just alright, and I think I'm going to forget about it pretty quickly. Then there are two more books to talk about. The first one is Unspeakable, a queer gothic anthology edited by Celine Vroon. Celine is one of our community's own. She has started her own publishing house called Nyx Publishing, and this is the first book that she published. It's a collection of 18 short stories. They are all queer and gothic. And I had a good time reading this, but unfortunately I didn't have a great time reading this. There were a couple of stories that I really loved, that I thought were very well done, very well written, and had amazing characters. But of the 18 stories, most of them were just okay to me, and there were a few even that I didn't really like. It was an okay read. I'm glad that I read it. I thought the queer representation was very well done. I really liked the gothic vibe and the creepy vibe that most of these stories had. And if you like short stories, queer stories, and gothic stories, I definitely recommend it, because it is a fun read. And then the last book is Cinderella and the Glass Ceiling and Other Feminist Fairy Tales by Laura Lane and Ellen Hahn. This is, as the title suggests, retellings of fairy tales in a feminist way. It's very funny, it's very witty, it's very modern, as in it's really based in our society. It talks about the glass ceiling, it talks about microaggressions and consent. There is also something about social media in here, so it's very modern. I don't think it will be for everyone, because you do have to enjoy this sense of humor, this lightness with which these stories are told, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun way to look at these fairy tales in a new way. And if you like feminist stories that are a bit tongue-in-cheek, that are very light but also dive into some heavier topics, then I definitely recommend this. And that's it for my June wrap-up. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I think those were all the books that I read in June. In the comment down below, please let me know if you've read any of these books. What did you think of them? What was your favorite book that you read in June? And please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of me in the future. And have a wonderful day. Bye!